My name's Erin Cameron, and I just finished a PhD in ecology at the University of Alberta. I worked with Aaron Bain, and I was looking at earthworm invasions in the boreal forest, including both their effects and how they might be introduced to different areas via human activity. I was working for my supervisor doing bird surveys, and he had noticed some research on earthworm invasions and convinced me that it was a cool topic that I should work on. I was already interested in invasive species, so it wasn't too hard of a sell in that way. There's no native earthworms in most of Canada and the northern United States. They were extirpated, wiped out by the last glaciations. So the species that we do have here were introduced to North America with the arrival of European settlers. So by earthworm invasions, there's no native species of earthworms here. They're exotic species or non-native species coming from Europe or Asia. The first part of my research looked at how earthworms are introduced to northern Alberta. When we first started working, we didn't know if there were any earthworms in northern Alberta, so we figured that out first, and then we tried to figure out how humans might be spreading them or if they were expanding on their own. After that, I did some work on the genetics of earthworms to try to figure out whether there were multiple introductions of earthworms in northern Alberta, or maybe just one major introduction after, and then they'd spread after that point. And it appeared that there were multiple introductions. More recently, we've been looking at effects on a variety of species, including American robins, a few species of plants, some small invertebrates, and fungi. A lot of my research is simply figuring out where earthworms are in Alberta. So we'd have a hypothesis that they might be spread by anglers, and then we'd sample at boat launches versus other sites. One of the things I've been doing this summer is resampling sites that we sampled 6 years ago to look at how quickly they spread. So again, that's resampling and just figuring out where the earthworms are. Some of our other research involves experiments, so then we end up with different types of data, maybe data on other plant species, or the abundance of other invertebrates in the soil following the introduction of an earthworm treatment. Typically, I'll think of a research question and then I'll come up with a hypothesis that I want to test. Then I design a study to test that hypothesis and go out and collect the data and then analyze the data. So the data I collect allows me to test whether my hypothesis is supported or not. In other cases, I might have a lot of data that I've collected previously, and I think of some research question at a later date and try to test a hypothesis using my data after the fact. That's usually not quite as straightforward of a process. We don't know very much about where earthworms are in Alberta, so this data collected by students will allow us to figure out what their distributions are, and it might allow us to set up some more studies looking at their effects on other species. And some of the other data that will be collected in addition to earthworm occurrence, we'll also be able to analyze that and look at effects of earthworms on litter and whether different human activities and forest types or habitat types in general are more likely to have earthworms than other areas. So it should contribute a lot of general information on distributions, as well as allow us to test some specific hypotheses. Yes, even if it's only in urban areas, there haven't been any real surveys in Edmonton. So one way it might help is, for example, sometimes I'm doing a study and I want to focus on a particular earthworm species, but I don't know where I could go in Edmonton to collect that species to examine it. And we could still look at how different human activities affect distributions of earthworms even within a city. There are some places around Edmonton where there are no earthworms, for example. My old backyard in St. Albert didn't have any for a very long time. So.